Welcome back to Move the Bowl Please, a podcast hosted by me, yours truly, Sandra. It's been a little minute, it's been a little second, it's been a little moment since we've seen each other. How are you doing? I'm not doing well. I am not doing well, and that's okay. And that's really fine. We don't need to really get into it. But we will get into it. But we don't need to get into it, but we'll get into it. It is the literal second week of April. Don't ask me how we got here. I don't even know what the hell going on right now. And this episode I had been wanting to record weeks ago. But life hits you hard and it hits you fast, and you don't really have the ability to get these things out, especially when the source material is so incredibly dark. But here we are. So, I will say that the film that I'm going to be, kind of deconstructing a little bit is a fantastic watch. Highly recommend. Unfortunately, it's on Amazon, where you can watch this program. And Amazon, the fact that they're still that they did this bullshit where they're literally asking you to pay more to get no ads. This is the world we live in 2024, where we pay for a service, and then they say, no, you need to pay more money to us. We need more of your money. You're already paying us. We need more of it. Stop thinking that you can keep your money. It belongs to us. That's what they think. So they started playing ads in the Prime subscription for the TV. Anyway, if I think about it, I'm a Papa eye vessel. But I'm going to say the movie is great. Find a way to watch it. The movie in question is The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is an adaptation of a silent film that was filmed in the early 1900s. But this specific film that I'm referencing was released in 1939. I highly recommend it. It is almost 2 hours of pure adrenaline. Truly and honestly. It starts off a little slow, but it picks up immediately. And I found myself being locked in place for nearly 2 hours. And I'm telling you, this is like, I'm a Gen Zer. Apparently we have zero frame of reference for, an attention span. We only know TikTok and motherfucking Instagram. So 2 hours of my attention unfiltered, or uninterrupted, you're not gonna get that everywhere. But for this film, they successfully were able to do that. And only good writing, only good film can do that. And this film, it focuses on the direct collateral damage that racism and classism and xenophobia and every other disturbing thing wreaks over human beings. And this specific story, which was written by Victor Hugo back in the time, that was a story that had been adapted several times over, all the way up until which the most of the adaptation that is the most popular amongst people my age is the one that was released in 96. So from my memory of the Disney film of this story versus this source material, vastly different. 63 years of difference, actually. But I could still see what they were trying to hit for the kid audience. But this is not a kid's film. This is not a film for children. This is not a film for people who get for people who are affected. But I digress. So, the screenwriter for this specific film, for this specific adaptation of the story, her name was Sonia Levien. And she wrote the screenplay to reflect the actual issues of the time in the 1930s, which, as we clearly know now, was the persecution of Jewish people and of Romani people. The film does use the outdated term to refer to Romani people, and I've been slowly but surely getting more information myself about the specific stigma and the specific literal just discrimination, the prejudice that a lot of Romani people face to this day. And so seeing this film really gave me even more insight about just the historical precedent that a lot of Romani people are still subjugated in Europe. And this is a European problem. This is not a problem that I can say from my perspective that I've witnessed anywhere else but Europe. And I'm not even European. I don't live over there. So that says something. And another thing that's really interesting about this film is that it was one of the first films that was showcased at the first Cannes Film Festival before it had to be canceled because of the beginning of the Second World War. Yes. I found that to be extremely, extremely profound. The fact that a film that was talking about the ever growing hate that Jewish people in Europe were facing, and alongside them, many other groups. The fact that this film was aiming to make a reflective, piece of art around that problem, and then for it to subsequently be stopped from being viewed by people because of the killing of Jewish people. I feel like that's very interesting to me. I found that to be incredibly, incredibly ironic. And the film itself, the production of this film, predates the Second World War and the Holocaust itself. So literally within its production and within its completion and execution, it was prophesying what could potentially happen to victims of just pure, unadulterated prejudice. And I also find that to be extremely, I don't even know the word for it, but it's something. And I believe that artwork is an extremely powerful thing. I will never try to downplay what artwork can do, what creating pieces of artwork can be, And, when artwork is monopolized, when the means of production, when the distribution even of these things is, stifled, it can lead to people to only think about things in a black and white perspective. I didn't really mean to make that pun, but it happened. And, hindsight will always be 2020, right? And one of the things that really kind of hit me was how one of the first negative reviews for this film, even though it only really was able to showcase in a couple places globally, was that the critic was very concerned about how horrific this film was and how it was, comparable to other works of horror at the time. By the way, this is 1939, y'all. So they don't got a lot to work with, right? And the critic was basically saying that this film makes Frankenstein look comedic. I want you to think about this for a second. We have people who, anyone born in 1939 or before is itching 100. They're itching towards that. So you got to think about the sensibility of these people. They don't even like ankles for real. So if someone's saying this film makes another film that is intended for specifically horror, that it makes that specific film seem funny, should be alarming. It should alarm you and me and them and everyone. And the fact that a film critic in the New York Times, of all goddamn places, was able to see that, make that astute observation, and thinking that it was somehow an indictment when it was actually just reaffirming the message of the film, I found that to be very interesting. And this film can, to me, can only be described as like a photographic copy of what the conditions had to be for there to be a World War II. The conditions had to be in such a way that someone like Quasimodo, someone like a disabled, outcasted, and disenfranchised person could then continuously be villainized and victimized with impunity just because of who they are. I feel like that is a perfect setup for what happens next. Let's very quickly go over what happens in this film, okay? It's a 2-hour film, so we're gonna get through it. We're gonna get through it, babe. Don't worry. The beginning of the film is actually one of my favorite parts. The ending is cool, but the beginning is great. So the beginning of the film starts with the King of France, right? And he is, captured in a space. It looks like a shop, and he is celebrating the invention of the printing press. And he's accompanied by Frollo, who is the brother of the Archbishop of the Notre Dame church, hence the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Notre Dame, whatever you want to do, I don't mind. And so the king and Frollo are in this shop. The printing press is new. It's from Germany. It's fun. It's exciting. And the king is excited for this. Frollo is not having it. He does not like it. He doesn't want it in his town. He doesn't want it in his neighborhood. He thinks that the printing press is going to destroy France. Now, mind you, in the title card, because this is something a lot of old films do, they have a title card. And also they have like some sort of like exposition text that basically describes the what happened, and we kind of get introduced as an audience as to what is currently happening in the scene. And so the text beforehand, before the movie starts, it kind of lays like the ground to say that France is in a transitional period. It had just emerged from a war, and it was ready for progression. It was ready for some sort of, new era to usher in. But at the same time, there's still like this sort of fear that some Frenchmen have with superstition, with overall fears of the unknown, of the esoteric. There's still this bubbling human fear that remains within the French people in Paris, because they're in Paris. Niggas was in Paris. I'm sorry, I had to do it. But yeah, so this is the time and space that France is in at the moment, and the king is more sympathetic to the progression of the French people than Frollo, and Frollo is part of the elite. He is a rich person, and so that dichotomy, while the king being rich himself, it is still very interesting to me. I found it to be very unorthodox. Usually people in power, like kings, are more kind of sympathetic to their advisors and to the people who are within their circles. But the king is playful and strange, and he kind of mirrors more the public than Frollo, and I found that to be super refreshing, because it felt like you had a friend, in the scene somewhat. And while there's like this central conflict between the Romani people and other people of lower class within the film itself, Frollo seems to still find a way to connect witchcraft and sorcery as the reason why such things as the press, the printing press, shouldn't be accepted into France, that it should be banned because it would destroy French society, which what can't destroy their society? I'm telling you, if the wind blows the wrong way in France, they're gonna lose their minds. I think the threshold is very low for them, but I digress. So there's this event called Fool's Day. And the film starts with Fool's Day being a really big celebration that a lot of people in Paris are really happy to celebrate. And basically, Fool's Day is just a role reversal, where people in the town, people in the square, find the fool to name the king, and they will herald him as king for that day only. And it's an opportunity for the public to choose what the majority desires, right? It's silly, it's communal, and it's rambunctious. And one of the direct quotes from the king actually is that we extract pleasure from horror. And I found that to be extremely poignant because, like that critic said, the rest of this movie is a horror, honestly. And the film doesn't really actually give Quasimodo much to actually say. He doesn't get a chance to really talk a lot. Most of Quasimodo's acting is all body language. So you can kind of already feel the sense that he's not a person who has the ability to communicate very effectively. That makes him vulnerable, right? And we learn later on that he's been deafened by his job as being the bell ringer. But even before we really are clarified with that information, we see Quasimodo as a kind of like a pathetic character, and pathetic being like, the direct definition of the word, which is to have pathos, to have, a sympathy for, to feel bad for, And while he is the main character, we're only introduced to him maybe in like the next couple moments of the film as well. And when he's crowned king and he is celebrated for his ugliness, because that's why he's crowned king of fools, is because of how ugly he is. He's not rewarded actually for that. It's cut short. But we'll skip a bit forward to Esmeralda. We're introduced to Esmeralda as a Romani girl, a Romani woman. She is, effectively seen as an illegal in France, in Paris, and she's almost expelled out of France, but she seeks asylum in the Notre Dame church, where the laws of Paris no longer apply within the church. And so she's able to, seek asylum in this space and avoid law. And Frollo obviously meets her. He's horny as hell. He cannot hold it. He is so bricked up, and he has no idea what to do with himself. And, Esmeralda is praying to the Mother of God to help her people, to allow the king to accept her entire family, her entire community into Paris, because they have been continuously rejected. And she's seeking the help of the Mother of God to help her. And Frollo is entirely insulted that a Romani girl has more faith in her entire body than he would ever have in the tip of his fingernail. And I know that's gotta hurt. I know that seeing someone do something so much better than you could ever do in your life, it will sting. I can sympathize with that. That's where my sympathy ends for this nigga. He's fucking disgusting. So many more things happen. And afterwards, we're introduced to the beggar kingdom. Now, there's a subplot within this subplot. So, Esmeralda is accepted within the beggar kingdom. The beggar kingdom is located right beneath the public court of the Notre Dame church. And she's accepted there because she is, watch the movie, but she's accepted, okay? And then there's this other guy called Gringoire. He is a French poet who's he's naive and optimistic and idealistic, but he also has great perseverance. And so he finds himself within this predicament where he's in the kingdom of beggars and he doesn't belong there. And he's about to be killed, executed for not being part of the society. This is reflecting back to how Esmeralda was also almost executed for being Romani within the French community. But Esmeralda saves Gringoire. She is able to actually emancipate him through marriage, which is very, very fun and feminist. She's able to save the man by saying that she will take his hand in marriage in order to spare him from execution and to also integrate herself within the beggar kingdom. And the beggar kingdom is kind of like somewhat of another, I want to say, analogy for another type of system. Another type of system that we, as people who are part of the, authoritarian, Puritan and Western concept of respectability, it's another kind of space that we don't understand, but still abide by in our own ways. They have their own rules and customs, and they can't allow a foreigner, which would be Gringoire, to be within their space. They're like, we don't do that over here. That's our rules. And she was able to help him by remaining within their guidelines, and to save him despite it not actually benefiting her in any way. So I found that to be so perfectly well done without really having to spell it all out like I did. And I couldn't... Y'all, I love this movie. They did such a good job. But anyway, she describes... Because she doesn't actually like Gringoire. Like, Gringoire is in love with Esmeralda. But... she doesn't like him like that. She just saved him because she didn't want to see him die, because she has a moral conscience. And so he accepts the fact that she is not going to, return his affections. And he's just happy to be in her life in any way that looks like. And I found that to be so freaking helpful to my literal stone of a heart, because... Every day. Let me not get into that. But I found that to be so refreshing and so mature. And that was just a really sweet moment, within this film of chaos. And so I'm going to skip a bit forward again. So now Gringoire and Esmeralda are saved from their terrible fate within the beggar's kingdom. But another fate is befalling Quasimodo, because now... right after being crowned the King of Fools, he is being flogged for a crime. And the crime itself wasn't entirely his fault, but he's being punished. And he is being flogged in public and having to be ridiculed on the pillory for an hour. And he's being, berated and where he's being assaulted by the crowds of people who were, screaming his praises only a day ago. And it's heartbreaking. It's such a sad scene. And he somewhat accepts it as being part of the lowest rung of society. But even despite that, Esmeralda takes a moment to go up to him and give him water because he was begging for water. And at first, that scene, I'm telling you right now, that scene made me bawl. I cried. Period. Oh, what was his name? The main actor. Oh, God, I'm blanking on his name right now. But that main actor who played Quasimodo is a genius. And I don't know if we're ever going to get that type of performance again. At first, he doesn't really accept her rescuing. He doesn't accept her acceptance. But he does, in fact, do it. And he never forgets that he did that for her. He always remembers her for that. And I can only describe that as powerful. I can't describe that as anything else but that. And so, whilst in the midst of seeing all the people who were praising him, turning his back on him, the one person who could have legitimately, before Esmeralda even came into the picture, the only person who could have actually saved Quasimodo was Frollo. Frollo had adopted him. Frollo had taken care of him, had put him under his wing. And even in the midst of him being flogged in public and Frollo witnessing that, he did his little thing of being a spineless coward and didn't save him. And I think the fact that Frollo, who was a person with so much social cachet and so much social power, not doing the right thing, versus Esmeralda going out of her way, even endangering herself by revealing that she's no longer within the asylum that Notre Dame gives, and she gave him water. We know why certain people win in these stories and why certain people lose in these stories. And we'd only hope that it's reflected in real life, but I digress. Frollo left Quasimodo friendless. And that's the point of this episode.
And then another thing, one last point to your initial question, how do you get people to do this? I think what's also very important is that to do this, I think the victims have to be perceived not only as helpless in the sense of, yes, they can fight, but they're much weaker than you objectively. So it's very difficult for them to pay you back, to exact cost on you, right? No, they also have to be perceived as isolated, as, if you want, friendless.
So I'm going to cut nearly 100 years later, about like 84 years later, actually, right now, to a conversation that Tariq Cyril Amar had with Breakthrough News nearly a month ago. And that conversation, which I'll link below, was extremely... It just puts so much into perspective for me as a person. So he's a German historian who's based in Turkey right now. And within this conversation that he had with Rania, he prefaced it by saying that he was not the most foremost scholar of the Holocaust. He acknowledges that there are several people who know much more about the intricacies of that specific genocide. And he still, within his breadth of knowledge, he said that there is precedent, or there is basis to compare what's happening in Gaza to the Holocaust. And there's a couple points that he goes through which I really thought were poignant. To begin with, it's to say that crimes that gain or crimes that are committed for the reason of sadism can only be done when you reduce the compassion that the perpetrators would have otherwise. So you have to dehumanize a victim so much to the point where you can compare them to animals, you can compare them to vermin, or you can just have them be seen as a nuisance. That's the only way that can happen. And you have to exclude them as well from social obligation, from moral obligation. You have to hear people say, well, we don't owe them anything. Basically meaning we don't owe them normality. We don't owe them any kind of general kindness and understanding. They're different. They are not like us. That's the process that must occur for these crimes to continue. And Israeli society is perfectly primed for this, right? They're ready to accept the genocide of their neighbors. They're ready to accept the genocide of whoever stands in their way, whether they're journalists, whether they're social workers, whether they're paramedics, whether they're doctors, it doesn't matter. They're ready to perpetrate that crime without any problem. And overall, the entirety of the state itself needs to be on the side of these sadistic crimes, right? And it has to come from every angle, whether someone's on the side of it ideologically, whether they're on that side of it narratively, or through information, warfare, through information embargoes as well, cut to Netanyahu saying that they'll get rid of Al Jazeera in Israel. And it has to be done through this deceit and perjury and through emotional manipulation. It's done through many ways, but it will be done. And that will turn an ordinary citizen, an ordinary person, into an instrument of war. And the West reinforces Palestinian isolation in every way. And another thing that Tariq mentions is that denying the ability to compare the Holocaust to any other crime in itself, it ends up being a racist thing. It does. Because that places a dynamic on any other type of genocide, meaning that any other type of killing of people for no reason other than just hate cannot be compared to the most explicated, the most deconstructed, the most studied version of genocide. It's to say that other genocides cannot compare to this genocide by virtue of who is being genocided. We know people who have been going through genocides from time immemorial up until now. And to have that reflex to never try to even begin to compare the numbers, compare the figures, compare the pain and atrocity. And it's not to put one over the other. It's for us to put a framework to understand what we know for sure we cannot tolerate and what we're confused on. I haven't been confused about this genocide in Gaza. Many people are not confused about this genocide in Gaza. And yet there are people who will not be able to do that comparison because of that specific kind of racism. And many people don't really want to go there, but I'm with Tariq. I'm ready to go there. I don't, It doesn't bother me, because all I know is that all genocides are wrong. And in the same breath that I can fully, wholeheartedly, with my entire spirit and all of my bones, refute anyone who tries to even slightly, disinflate the heaviness of the Holocaust, I will, with that exact same vigor and vim, go toe to toe to anyone who tries to say that what's happening in Gaza is not comparable. It is entirely comparable. And there's no funny in there. That's just what it is. And then you can consider it within the victim's perspective for a moment. Tariq turns it to the other side, So he kind of puts the concept of a bystander, he just puts that in the bin completely. And I think it would make sense for it to be considered a partial lie, a partial falsehood to say that bystanders exist within these contexts. And he refers back to how a lot of Jewish people within the European continent are, during the time of World War II, were very comparable to how Palestinians are being treated right now. They are being abandoned by the world. They were abandoned by the world. Gazans were abandoned by the world for several years. Palestinians were abandoned by the world for several years. The messaging to them, to these victims, has been that you don't count, your child doesn't count, your neighborhood doesn't count, anything that you think is precious and valuable will be destroyed, all of your memories will be dashed. Every single thing that people right now can't even fathom is being exacted on Palestinian people. And the horror of that is that it's not even the fact that these things are happening to them, it's that barely anyone is coming to their rescue, is coming to help them.
Ask yourself, okay, the United States isn't ready to send an army to fight Israel. If we lived in a normal world, the West should send armies to fight Israel, to defeat Israel. That would be a normal world. It's hard to imagine because ours is so far removed from that. If we were in a normal world, there would be an international coalition led by the West, led by the North, because they still have the biggest armies, and they would attack Israel and stop it. That would be a normal world, right? Acting according to the 1948 Genocide Convention and all sorts of other very important rules. But let's assume, okay, we can't even handle that. But we live in a much worse world than that. We live in a world in which, as we know, not only the USA, although the worst quantitatively, Germany, Canada, France, Britain, you name them, have proactively continued supporting the genocide. They are literally accomplices. They're not just tolerating it. That would be bad enough. That's horrible. They're accomplices. They're so deep inside this. I'm almost thinking accomplice isn't even the right word anymore. It's like a co-production. They're co-genociding. I would say the Germans are co-genociding with the Israelis. If you look at their arms exports, they have ramped them up during the genocide. The Americans, on a different scale, bigger of course, same picture. I truly don't know if accomplice even suffices anymore as a word.
And even on top of that, people are finding ways to side with the people who are doing it to you. And going even further, are people who are finding a similar joy that these perpetrators have in your pain. The internet is a terrible medium for any kind of understanding for real emotional damage and real physical cultural genocidal damage. Any historical precedent that illegitimate states like Israel have is completely null and void on the internet. The bloodlust of a typical internet troll, they don't have the capacity to understand that they're defending people who are bathing in the blood of children. They're not going that far. They just want to say some stupid things on the internet and feel okay about it. I don't know how they do all of that. But one of the worst things about this is that because Gazans are being killed in such a way, it makes all of us such easy targets now. It makes all of us seem actually destroyable. There might have been a time where killing thousands upon thousands of children and thousands upon thousands of women might have seemed barbaric. That's no longer the case. And actually, that statement in itself is false, because killing people, killing children and women and men has always been justifiable. But it's specific kinds of people that were once okay to kill and now are becoming just a little bit bad to kill, but it's still doable. It's still something that we can do. Gaza is a precedent. It's one of the biggest failures I've ever really been able to grasp in my life when it comes to what's happening to human beings as a whole. And then you can think about places like Goma, the Eastern DRC, or what's happening in Burma, or what's happening and what's been happening for almost close to a year now in Sudan. Gaza is a precedent, but Gaza was not the first precedent. For some people, there are genocides that are justifiable for them. And you have to live with that every day. Tariq also goes over the danger of technology. One can only shudder at the image of a Congolese baby, a 5-year-old, breaking their nails, digging through dirt, through hardened soil to find cobalt and coltan and other conflict minerals to power robots that would be used for the destruction of their Palestinian brothers and sisters. Every single missile and every single machine gun and tank and drone and these literal nightmare fuel technologies that they label with things like the gospel, that are being constructed with minerals that are dug up by children in Congo and in other places. It is so fantastically criminal that in addition to helping, people connect with each other and helping you to view this video, these same technologies are being used to cut people into pieces. Tech is being used to cannibalize human beings. And it's beyond anything that we can really even comprehend, because these AI technologies are killing people at a speed that no human being could ever even begin to think to do. And that's the technology that places like Israel has the resources to have. Don't turn your back on someone who needs you. The pit that you feel in your stomach when you see someone who could use your help is such a blessing that I don't think many of us consider it so. It feels like shit. It does. But I'd rather feel like shit than be a piece of shit. Fighting that natural urge to be a rescuer, to be someone who could actually be a beacon of light, be a conduit for change. Trying to ignore that is so much worse than being someone who is perpetrating the pain. You were once friendless. You're watching this YouTube video. You're not popular. You are listening to this podcast. You used to be a loser. You might still be one. Honestly. You know how it feels. Think about it. Don't cut that idea off. Don't let them control you. Because anyone who has the agency to see what's happening in Gaza and beyond that, to contemplate how the rest of the world is going to be destroyed. You know, scientists have burned themselves alive because of how bad the climate crisis is. People are dying on the streets from not only the elements, but from things that they're using to cope, to withstand these elements. People are just ending their lives because it sucks. It sucks over here. It sucks so bad. It is so abysmally terrible on the planet Earth right now. It is so garbage right now. People are just choosing to just cut their lives short at alarming rates. Art is powerful. Being there for someone is a miracle. Embrace that challenge. Be the person that you know you needed. Be the Esmeralda who gives Quasimodo water. And if you can't be that, try to be someone comparable. And don't be afraid to break the mold in some way, because if there's one thing that I know very intimately, it's self-doubt. I know her. We have lunch every Wednesday. And I've proven myself wrong many times because I didn't listen to her, because I pushed myself to be a different version of myself, to be a version where I didn't allow myself to be controlled by what society might deem to be respectable or doable or profitable or just, I don't know, proper. I'm so tired of everyone, honestly. I get more and more tired of people. The only people I can somewhat tolerate are young people or children. But even then, man, we need to befriend each other again. We need to look for the goodness in each other again. And we need to be able to call some bullshit out when we see that bullshit. I don't care. You can do it in your own special, cute, unique way. But find a way, god damn it. Please. Do it in some way. Because we can't go back to World War II, girl. And it's coming. Y'all who don't think it's coming, it's coming. And if you don't want it to go back there, try to do something. So that was a really positive episode. Oh my God, you stuck until the end. Look at you. Well, I just want to tell you, you're not friendless. You have a friend in me. And if you want to still be friends, you should subscribe and like and comment and, you know, keep up with me. I don't know. I think it's really great to stay in touch with people, but connect with your family, connect with your friends, connect with yourself, breathe in and out, and be grateful that you're still here. Because we got a lot of work to do. So, all right. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.